Hey, what's up? Welcome to Two and a Half Husbands. My name is Black Newborn. If you're joining us for the very first time, shout outs to you. All right? Shout outs to the algorithm that it recommended this content. Hope that you'll find much value in the content that's made on this channel. If you've been here for a long time, you've supported the channel, you've supported the work, you've subscribed. All right, you've hit the notification bell, you've left a comment, you've shared this content with other people. Shout outs to you. Thank you very much. I have bittersweet news, and I'll have to start at the end and then work my way to the beginning to kind of explain how all of this unfolded. So the bitter news is that I am leaving Two and a Half Husbands, the channel. And I will then further explain as I get into this video why I have come to that decision. But the sweet news is that I am not stopping making content around husbandhood. I'm still a husband, not divorcing my wife. I'm not leaving her. And I'm very eager now more than ever to continue telling the stories of husbands who are faithful, who are showing up, husbands again who are not perfect, but in their imperfections, in their weaknesses, in their failures, they're getting up and they want to be there. They want to uphold a very good image of marriage, especially in South Africa. They want to inspire a generation of other husbands who are coming behind them. They want to follow other husbands whose stories are not told, who went before them, right? And so I am continuing to tell those stories, to dig more into those stories. In fact, there's a link at the bottom in the description box of the channel that I am personally moving to. It's called The Dream Space, and I've started my own personal podcast there called That Husband Podcast, where husbands are trying to know better so that we can do better. And so if you've enjoyed any content that I've produced, any conversations I've been having with other guests, with other husbands on this channel, that's not stopping, okay? But it's only gonna take place on the Dream Space, on That Husband Podcast. So please go there, subscribe there, make sure that you hit the notification bell. In fact, even as you watch this video, when this is done and you head over to the Dream Space, there's already an episode there that I've done with a very good friend of mine, Privilege, and he's gonna run through his story, especially being in an interracial marriage, marrying somebody from a different country, and how all of that looks like and where he's going. And so again, there's more content around husbandhood. The journey is not stopping for me, and I respect you and love the fact that you've been supporting. And so it would be just a miss. It would suck if we would stop now. We believe so hard together that this conversation is needed, that we need to do more around husbandhood. And so there's gonna be a lot more that's happening there, right? So that's all the sweetness. So please go subscribe to the Dream Space and stay tuned for That Husband Podcast and all the content that's gonna come out there, right? So now let's go to some of the bitter stuff. Why am I leaving? Well, let's start at why I was part of this thing called Two and a Half Husbands to begin off with. I've shared so many times on this channel just my own personal story. So again, the thing that inspired me to get married was seeing my parents. My mom and my dad got married when my mom was 20, my dad was 25. There's a 5-year gap between them. And those were the first people I ever saw in my life who got married. Really inspired by them, saw how my dad loved my mom and how he cared for us, how he looked after us, and how that was just such a thing to behold, especially coming from the community that I come from Tembisa. It's obviously a black township, and there's a whole lot of things that happen around manhood, around fatherhood in the black community. And so coming from that community with that context in that backdrop, I was in fact the only kid I knew, right? Within my extended family, in my streets, who actually had a dad who was present, a father who was not only just present, but present doing very good things, right? Pouring into me, discipling me, loving me, shaping me, speaking life into me, coaching me. And not only that, but I saw how he also loved my mom, how he cared for my mom, how he was there for my mom, spiritually leading us as a family, financially taking care of us, emotionally being there to nurture us. I remember that my parents would always involve me in all the decisions that they would make, at least decisions that were age appropriate for me to get in and partake alongside them. But I was never shut out. I was never the kid who was seen and not heard, but I was encouraged to share my thoughts, to share my views, and for me to do life with them. And I think because they were also so young, we kind of grew up together. So that was just such an amazing thing for me to experience. And I did see, obviously, other kids around me who did not have fathers. But I just did not understand the reality and the weightiness of growing up without a father, without parents who are loving each other, and just the impact of what that will do to a young man's mind in how then they grow up and become a man, and how they also relate to women in relationships. I didn't know that. And so I was always, again, just inspired by how my dad was there, how my mom was there, and how they were loving each other. And we were just a family that was really thriving, aspiring for good things, for great things in life. And we were building together. Until I was 15, and again, I've shared this so many times here, when then my parents' marriage started breaking, and again, it was such a confusing time for me. Coming from what I describe as dope beginnings, getting to a point where I'm like, yo, man, I actually don't know what's going on here, right? And people who had involved me in their marriage, in their lives, in everything that they were doing, to suddenly having a communication breakdown, and that not getting any clarity, in fact, on what's happening till today, right? 36 this year, I still don't know how that whole thing broke down, right? In fact, last year in December, I was talking to my wife, who I've known, right, by God's grace for 17 years, I think, this year. And we've been married for 10 years. In fact, now in March, we're hitting 10 years, such a big milestone for us. But I was telling her recently just how much that whole time rocked me. And when I started explaining further, again, I've known this person for 17 years, but she didn't get the gravity of how much I was left in the dark. It was literally a day and night situation. One day, my parents are together, they're loving each other, they're the best couple I've ever known. We are a family that's together, that's striving, we are doing life together. Literally, no jokes, the next day, I'm thrown into the abyss. I'm thrown into a hole of darkness. I am thrown into confusion. I am thrown into aloneness, and you have to figure all of this stuff out yourself, right? Because at the same time, my mother's going through her own crisis, right? And she's also confused what is going on. How did this thing just switch? How did it just flip, right? It literally went from everything, it's load shedding. It's the first time you discover what load shedding is, right? You're sitting at home, there's lights right now, right? And you're just enjoying life. Days of Our Lives is playing there, and you can smell, minestrone soup is cooking in the background, there's mince and rice, just that warm family smell and feeling. And next thing, load shedding, right? First time load shedding happened, we were all confused, right? And it just felt like that, just plunged into darkness, and you're just wondering to yourself, what is going on? And I remember my mother asking me months later, like how I'm feeling, how am I processing all of this stuff, how am I doing? And I just said, listen, I'm fine, right? Because I felt fine. I didn't know what was going on, so I didn't even have the language, the tools to even engage with what was happening with my parents, and then try and interpret that in light of who I am in this whole picture and what that actually means for me. At this point, my second or my first sister rather is born, right? And so then I'm also trying to think, like, she's probably, I don't know how old at that point, because she was born when I was 9. My math fails, right? So 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, she's 6. And I'm trying to figure out, like, how's she interpreting all of this? But yet at the same time, I'm not thinking she's a 6-year-old who's probably, just getting a shock of her life, because as much as I was shocked, I just did not know that's the thing that was happening, right? Because I just thought things will be fine. Again, as a family, and my parents as a couple, they were not perfect because no couple is perfect. I'm married now for 10 years. I know that for sure, right? I've seen them have their ups and downs. I've seen them have arguments. I've seen them, I have really difficult and tough times, but they've always pushed through. They've always pulled through. They've always come out on the other side and better, right? And more faithful and more loving. And so this time around, I thought to myself, well, this thing is probably gonna change. They're gonna come back and sit together and iron it out and things are gonna be fine. I didn't think this is it. My life is changing, right? And so, again, explaining to my wife this very recently, and I remember my wife saying to me, like, that was such a, like, trauma, and I think we've abused that word so much and we've taken the juice out of it, but it was a death. It was a kind of death, right? That your life moves from light, future, hope, goodness, like all great things, to darkness, confusion, nothingness, loneliness, figure your life out, right? And I think for the greatest part of my adulthood, I've just been trying to do that, figure it out. Again, because the thing where I found meaning from, where I found belonging, where I found a sense of being propelled into the world, where I gained confidence from, literally just the ground underneath me was cracked open and there was just an abyss and I kept on falling and there was just never a sense of stability, until later on, which I'll obviously get into. But all of that to say that experience in my life has always been a thing that's nagging in my heart. When I think about marriages, when I think about families, when I think about husbandhood, particularly, right? And at that point, I didn't obviously have the language for it, and then went to varsity, even got married. I didn't have the language, and even the perspective of realizing that, smack, I think the role of husbands is a very crucial role in society, not just in the family, but in society. I think husbands play a very special, very unique, very critical, very important role in light of manhood, in light of fatherhood, in light of society. I think husbands are very crucial, which I'll get into. But again, I didn't have that language, and so by the time 2.5 Husbands starts, that's my motivation. That's my push. I am trying to retell a story of dope beginnings. And by the time it gets to the part where things crack, I am like, yo, how do we rewrite that narrative from that point, right? How do we change that? How do we make sure that my story with my marriage to my children and any other husbands that are listening is going to be a different story? How do we help other husbands, right, who seem to be alone, who feel like the weightiness of being a husband is this thing that they're carrying alone? They don't have a band of brothers, right? At the time when 2.5 is starting, we enjoying the fellowship of being in a brotherhood, right? And not just the 3 guys who start 2.5 Husbands, but we're in a larger community of older men, of men who are our age, of younger men who are getting married, who are married, who've been married for years. In fact, as I think there's a gentleman that I will invite. I've actually spoken to him, but he'll come through on that husband podcast. He's been married for 42 years, right? Black gentleman. And again, I say black because it's in my experience very rare to find black couples. I'm not saying they're not there. Again, where I'm from, where I live, to find black couples who've been married for that long, right? I know a couple of white couples who've been married for 30 years, 35 years plus. I can name them and I have them in my fingers. I can put my toes. There's a lot of them, right? But black couples, black gentlemen, black men, black husbands, struggling to count them, struggling to find them. But all of that to say, again, in the community that we're in, we enjoy the blessing intergenerational blessing of seeing husbands who've been married for 40 years plus, to see husbands who are married for 20 years, for 15 years, for 10 years, husbands who are married for 5 years and less, right? And we get to enjoy that. And so I'm thinking to myself, how many other husbands are out there who don't have such a community, who don't have such a brotherhood, who don't have such voices speaking into their lives? Again, the responsibility of being a husband is not an easy one. It's a beautiful one. It's a joyous one. There's glorious moments, but there's also very tough moments. As you carry this weight, you need to be looking after somebody's daughter that you took from their house, and now you're saying you're making them your wife, and you have to look after them. You've made promises, you've made vows to their family, to them, to God, to your community, and so you carrying that, right? And so you want to obviously be a great leader. And sometimes leaders fail because they don't have other examples before them, or they don't have people speaking into their leadership. They don't have people speaking into their mistakes, their flaws. They don't have people celebrating their victories, their wins, so that their heads don't grow and that they don't have big egos, but they can come back and realize we need to lead from a place of humility. We need to be humble servants in order for us to actually be great leaders, right? And so we start this thing, and it's great, right? It's amazing just for us. To kind of reflect on where our marriages are, which is another point that we need to make much of. Just how much these conversations I've been having with many husbands and many other people who joined the microphone on 2.5 Husbands, and I'll name all of those guests that we've given shout outs to. But again, as this is a moment of departure for me, I think it's only right to acknowledge them and thank them for their contributions. But there's many conversations that were had, particularly me personally, and how those conversations have benefited my own marriage. As I reflected on what it is to be a husband, when I've shared my struggles, my flaws, my victories, my lessons, things that I've held on to and realized that I needed to let go now because I was challenged by a conversation, or things that I need to press in deeper because I've been neglecting, and I came to that realization again because of a conversation that I was having. All those things have grown my marriage. I think, again, we started 2.5. The conversations around this was 2022 and 2023. We officially start the channel. But in this 1 year and some change, I think, my marriage has grown in leaps and bounds. Because what would happen is that we'd shoot an episode, I'd have a conversation with somebody. And obviously, I am not on this platform. I'm not on this camera. I'm not on these microphones without my wife's permission. I'm not even going on to the next platform, the Dream Space with That Husband podcast, without my wife's permission. This is our marriage. This is our story. And she's been such a great support, obviously, and allowing for me to share our story and our lives on camera like this. But what would happen is we'd have a conversation with people, we'd be shooting, etc. And then she would watch the episodes. At least this is at the beginning, right, of 2.5 Husbands. And then we would have a conversation about that. Because again, as I'm speaking, there's some reflections that I'm having. There's some new thoughts that are coming in real time as I'm having the conversation with somebody. There's some things that I'm ironing out as well as I'm having this conversation with somebody. And we would then go back and reflect and see how those things are really helpful. There's things that might have also been unhelpful that were hidden and came out because I was challenged in a conversation. And now we bring those things into the light of our marriage, and then we say, hey, let's actually look at these things, let's analyze them. What are things about this one thing that needs to go away? What are things that we need to keep, etc., etc. Right? So that's been so dope, man. It's been dope hearing you, right? Coming to me when you bump into me, which has been great, bumping into people in various events, various spaces, and people are just saying, yo, man, keep up the good work. What you guys are doing at 2.5 Husbands is really changing marriages. It's changing how husbands are thinking. In fact, there's one wife that was just so instrumental. Again, she had been following my career and my wife's career long before 2.5. And when she got married, we were just so happy for her. We actually went to her wedding. It was super dope. And I remember meeting her last year in September at an event that we put on. And she came up to me and she was like, yo, man, there's one episode. She didn't tell me particularly, but one episode that really got her husband thinking about some particular area in his life, in his marriage. And stuff like that, that just makes me think, hey man, I knew that these conversations are not just conversations, they actually impacting people, and just hearing the feedback in real time further solidifies why personally I am not stopping having to have these conversations, why I'm not personally stopping in speaking into the husbandhood space, and why I think we need more voices, we need more things that are catered towards husbands. And again, I want to speak about why the role of the husband is so crucial, right? But when she comes to me and she says that, I'm like, wow, Lord, we can't stop. I can't stop. We need to keep going. We need to have more of these conversations. Single people coming and just saying, hey man, you guys are giving us a fresh perspective on what marriage is. Again, a lot of other people on the line, online rather, on the internet, on the interwebs, who are married. You know, there's either two extremes. People speak about the ugliness of marriage, you know, the toughness of marriage, the hardness of marriage, and then on the other side, people are just hashtag love lives here, and they actually never reflect on the hardness of marriage. But it's all good, it's perfect, it's glamorous, it's all of these amazing things. But one thing I've always been mindful of, just in reality, that's what life is. It's both things. Life is good, life is bad. Life has high moments, life has low moments. It seems very simple to say, but when it comes to content creation, it's actually very rare to find channels, to find content creators who live in this risky middle, right? Because if you're only making stuff about how horrible things are, that's sensational, and then people want to run to that. Or on the flip side, people just want perfection because they want to escape the badness, the brokenness, the hardness of the life that they're living, right? So they'll run to perfect looking life content creation, or they'll run to sensational, bad things are horrible type of content creation. But again, where 2.5 has always existed is in this risky middle of saying, in that risky middle, hey, listen, life can be this, life can be that. Marriage especially is gonna be the best time of your life, but it's also gonna be the most challenging time of your life. Marriage is really gonna bring out things in you, your selfishness, it's gonna bring out your sense of wanting to rule in your own agenda, with your own ways, without considering other people, but it's also gonna bring the sweetness, right? Of life, of partnering up with somebody, of caring for somebody, of serving somebody, of, if your wife, being led by somebody, if your husband leading somebody, etc., right? And so that's where 2.5 has existed. And I think that's been such a great thing. And so we've heard single people saying, thank you for that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Thank you so much for giving us a perspective of marriage that is not just gruesome, but a perspective of marriage that is also encouraging, that's hopeful, that is also sweet, right? So thank you for that. Thank you for all your feedback. Thank you for shouting outs. Thank you for coming back to us. Thank you. And it's been such a great encouragement for me. Even as I personally journey through what it means to make content around husbandhood. So thank you so much for that, man. Thank you for all the comments. The comment section has been such an amazing thing to engage in, and to hear people's thoughts, and to see other people challenge us, to see other people calling us to dig deeper in certain topics, right? So it's just been so dope. I've been appreciating the comment section, and just responding to the comments, man, and seeing how people are coming back over and over again. That has been such an amazing thing. Again, maybe let me get into it here. I've been saying that the role of the husband is very crucial. Here's the thing, right? We've heard so much about how manhood is in such a state of crisis. We've heard so much about, hashtag men are trash. We've heard so much about the perpetrators of gender-based violence being predominantly men. Right? We've heard so much about the stats of men not taking responsibility to want to commit to women in relationships and just stringing them along. We've heard all of that stuff. And I'm not saying that stuff is not true. The reason why we're hearing about it, it's because it's there, it's true. People are experiencing a level of brokenness. They're pushing back against it. They're calling it out. They want men to take up accountability and to take responsibility. And that's dope. And that needs to happen, right? On the flip side, we've been hearing a lot about fatherlessness, about the increasing rates of fathers who are leaving their children, men who want sex, but not the commitment of what the consequences and the results of sex bring. And that is a child, that is a life, that is having somebody in this world who will grow and one day want to become an adult, and yet they'll struggle with that because they had a father who was not there to pour into their lives so that they can become the full adult that they were meant to be. All right, so we hear all of that stuff, and there's a lot of good material that's done, podcasts, shows, radio broadcasts, books, conferences, church events, other events that are around encouraging fathers to show up and be present, right? But if I would even ask you, besides 2.5 Husbands and some other 1 or 2 podcasts, which content, which books, which conferences, which events, which broadcasts, which podcasts, which video casts are dedicated to husbands, right? Not many. And that's why this channel was started. That's why I personally am not stopping with speaking about husbandhood, because again, the role of the husband is a very crucial one. If husbands are there, and here's the thing, what kind of husband are we speaking about? We're not just speaking about any kind of husband, but we're speaking about a husband who will show up. We're speaking about a husband who is there. We're speaking about a husband who is faithful, not perfectly so, but a husband who prioritizes his wife, his marriage, his children, his family, his legacy, the values, the principles of how he's building this home. Not just building a house monetarily, but a husband who's there emotionally, a husband who's there spiritually, a husband who's there fighting his own urges of learning how to communicate to a female. As gents, we can speak to each other every single day, right? But yet when it comes to our wives, there seems to be a struggle when it comes to females in how we become authentic, how we show up and become vulnerable, how we show up and bring out parts of us that our boys can bring out, parts of us that we can only tap into in our own quietness of our own silence, right? But now we need to bring those to our women, to our wives particularly, right? Husbands who will make sure that they're fighting to find creative ways of how to communicate, how to be emotionally intelligent and grow in that. The kind of husband that will make an impact not only in his marriage, but in his society, in this country, and ultimately in the continent, and that will resonate with the rest of the world. Those kind of husbands, right? So we wanted to make much about them. And we're saying there's a lot of them, right? Again, we've seen this in our community. I've seen this in the community that I'm part of. But I know that there's many more of those husbands out there. Who are their names? What are their stories? What marriages do they have? What kind of legacy are they going to leave in light of the kind of kids that they're going to raise, in light of the kind of women that they're going to disciple, lead, love, care for, die for them, right? So that these wives, these women can become the best that God intended them to be. So we wanted to really champion those husbands. I want to champion those husbands. I never want to stop telling stories around those kinds of husbands. In fact, if I have to get into it here, right? That husband podcast, where husbands trying to know better so that we can do better, is even right now, right? We are putting together a book where we're going to write down names of husbands, right? Who are the kind of husbands that I'm describing, and not just so that we can have a record, but to have a record to say to people, we don't want to just throw stats. We don't want to just speak about fictional characters. We don't want to just say that these husbands are out there, but here are their names, here are their stories, right? How do we then give that book to future husbands? How do we give that book to struggling husbands to say, my dog, listen, you're not the only one, right? Who's trying to push hard, who's trying to be there, who's trying to love, who's trying to be faithful, but there's many more other husbands And here's a book with all their names, their stories, their flaws, their struggles, their victories, the things that they aspire to, their hopes, their goals as husbands. Here it is, right? And we're building that resource to give away for free, really, right? To give people so that they would be encouraged to know that husbands who are there, who love their wives, are there. It's not just fictional characters, right? And so for me, I am continuing that journey. I am continuing that story. And I would say to you, if you really have been enjoying this content, you have been encouraged, you found value in all the conversations that we've been having with people, don't stop. Hit that subscription button on the Dream Space, and every week, we will be dropping an episode showcasing another husband who's going to show their story, reveal their story, share their story with us, so that we can be encouraged, we can find value, we can really draw from them so that we can also have strength to continue pushing on as husbands. But everyone else around us as husbands, wives, sisters, right? Our daughters, people that we go to work with, people we go to church with, people that we meet at our grocery store, people who live in our complexes, who want to really champion husbands who are there, who are showing up, our friends who are single, our friends who are divorced, right? Who want to champion husbands. If you want to do that, again, please, it's not ending here. We're not ending here. Right? We are going to continue. So please jump over to the Dream Space and follow that husband podcast as we continue the conversation and continue the journey. I want to give a couple of shout outs to people, right? Start here. Obviously, give a shout out to Simba and Prince, who I started this channel with. Shout outs to those husbands. Champion them for all that they're doing in their marriages, and pray and hope that they continue. Being the example that they've been, the example that they're setting to many other husbands and people around them, right? So shout outs to those gents, man. Shout outs to David. David, who obviously, he's my homie, and the abuse is not stopping. So on that husband podcast, he's gonna be there. We can't get rid of that big head. That big head has to be a symbol of what it means to be a husband who shows up, right? How do you know that you're a husband who shows up? You see him with the head. So shout outs to David, man, for all the times that he's pulled through to the table to have a conversation. Shout outs to him. Shout outs to LNP, right, for sharing his story with us. That was super dope. I remember after we shot that episode with LNP, and I called him and I said to him, man, that episode is the quintessential episode of what it means to be a husband who shows up. Right? That story is exactly, that story coupled with my own story, with how my dad left, and how obviously that scar will forever be there. Am I healing? I am healing. I will heal. I'll continue growing from that, but it's always going to be there. I'm not going to have another dad. He's my dad, and obviously his absence has obviously impacted me in certain ways, and it also shapes how I continue making content about husbandhood and how I want to encourage husbands to be there, to stick it out, to show up, right? But that story, LNP story, man, that story really speaks into why I personally want to continue just encouraging husbands and sharing more content around husbandhood. Shout outs to Linde, who came through and shared his story with us. Shout outs to Mike. Mike was the first white guy that we interviewed on 2.5 Husbands, man. Shout outs to Mike for pulling through and just sharing his story with us, man, and how marriage has really shaped him and has given him just ways of how he can die to self, right? So that was super dope, man. Shout outs to everyone else who's been there. Obviously, Tracy, Theola, Mo and Sean, Sunny. Who am I forgetting? Grace, right? My wife has been there, obviously, right? Buski has been there. Cannot forget those girls. Michelle, right? Orange was the new red. We celebrated that with them. That was super dope. So shout outs to those girls. Shout outs to them for always coming through. How can we forget, right? C4, the cooking husband, who was on this platform. Thank you, man. And C4, we're coming back, man, to KZN, and we're going to shoot this thing with you again. We really appreciate you showing up. Go support C4, man. He's doing amazing things on his Instagram, and he's killing it there with his wife. They actually started or revived their YouTube channel as well. So look out for C4 the Cooking Husband on all platforms. Ezekiel Azonu, who was here, this was pretty dope. Just having a conversation with him again and just finding strength and drawing courage and hope in his story and how he balances everything he does and yet having to be a father of 5 and being a husband at the same time, right, man? Yo, there's been so many other people who've rocked up. Shout outs to you. If I forgot a name, just know that I am very thankful for how you showed up, you rocked up. When I invited you, you pulled through, you cared enough to come share your story. You trusted the channel that we could carry your story and represent it well and share it with other people. And people have found encouragement and hope, man. So shout outs to you and everybody who's pulled through. Please continue supporting. Please continue supporting as I transition to the dream space, as I move over to That Husband podcast. Please keep supporting, and we'll keep you updated again on what's happening here on this particular channel. But thank you so much, man. So please, all right? I'm going to go over to the dream space and I'm going to just sit there and wait for the subscriber count to keep going, because I'm hoping that you're going to migrate, because the conversation is not stopping, right? But thank you so much, man. This has been such an amazing time. It's been an awesome, we haven't actually hit a year, because our first episode we dropped was on the 4th. I said 5th the last time, but it was the 4th of April. So we're getting to that 1 year mark. But it's been such a great thing to be on 2.5, and it's gonna be still great, right? When you come through to That Husband podcast in the dream space. And for those who are wondering as well what the dream space is about, it's really just a space for creatives, for content creators who want to collaborate, right? So that's another dope thing about the dream space. So if you are a content creator who wants to make content, right? And you have great ideas and you have a vision, and you might be lacking in 1 or 2 things and you want to collaborate, right? Pull through, collaborate, hit me up. And we put you on the dream space. Let's take your ideas from being in your head and let's bring them into reality, but let's collaborate. Your dream matters as much as anyone else's dream, right? And your dream might not be to speak into the husband space. And you're watching this because you're benefiting in a certain way, but you have a dream in something else and you want to create content, or you just want to creatively collaborate with people. The dream space is that, right? So pull through for that, man. That's going to be super dope. We're going to continue the journey there. And I hope that you are inspired, you are encouraged, that you will continue to celebrate husbands that are becoming better. And on the dream space, on That Husband podcast, that you will champion husbands that are trying to know better. Just trying to know better, man, so that they can do better, because we want to do better as husbands, right? And we want to leave that legacy for other husbands who are coming after us. And we want to say thank you to husbands who came before us, right? And we want to shut them out. Definitely, right? So thank you so much. My name is Black Newborn, and it's been such a great thing to be here on this platform. And I'll see you the flip side, right? Go check out that episode 1 on the Dream Space, That Husband podcast with privilege. It's going to be super, super dope. Interracial marriage, Zimbabwean marrying a South African. How funny is that going to be, right? Come through. Let's go. Go subscribe. Go hit that thing. Hit the notification bell. Go there. And I'll see you, every Wednesday. We're dropping there every Wednesday as well, right? Peace out. We'll see you.